one of my favorite parts actually was giving the baby their first bath in the hospital. It is actually so much harder than you would think. Holding a baby with one hand while washing it and making sure it doesn't get too cold, and also the baby's crying. It was a lot of hard work for me. And at the time, I was, gosh, how old was I? I think I was probably 20, 20 years old or 21. So it was also new to me.
Most likely to be a director.
Most likely to be an engineer.
Most likely to be a journalist.
A doctor.
An astronaut.
A best-selling author.
Welcome to Most Likely To, a podcast presented by Donors Choose. We talk to some of the world's greatest minds to find out how they became who they are today. If you can see it, you can be it. Our guest today is Nurse Clara, a board-certified family nurse practitioner and a prolific creator on social media. Clara Jones immigrated from South Korea to the United States when she was just 7 years old and is a first-generation college graduate. Nurse Clara has a passion for empowering and building relationships with patients and has worked in various nursing specialties ranging from postpartum care to labor and delivery and gynecology. Working as a labor and delivery nurse at Northside Hospital, one of the busiest labor and delivery units in the nation, Nurse Clara served as a nurse preceptor mentoring the next generation of nurses. In this episode, you'll hear how Clara's identity as a Korean American woman has impacted her career, how she gained a following of nearly 100,000 followers on Instagram, and what every student should know about becoming a nurse. On Most Likely To, it's Nurse Clara. Let's start at the beginning. What did you want to be or think that you wanted to be when you grew up?
You know, that's such a funny question because I think when I was little, the answer is kind of like fed to us from our parents and like our culture and our society. So I think instead of like what I knew I wanted to be, I think I knew what was the right thing to be or the best thing to be. And I think for a lot of Asian Americans, we can agree that's always like a doctor or an attorney, and not anything like a nurse or a professor or a teacher. However, when I was growing up, I found that, okay, what my parents wanted me to be is different from what I want to be, and that's okay, even though it's hard. So I think the correct answer was, oh, I want to be a doctor. And I really thought that's what I wanted to be until I went to college.
Same. And I think that I know from my own experience that in the Asian community, being a doctor is everything. So how did your parents react to you wanting to pursue a career that was not becoming a doctor? And was there like a turning point for when you went for your career goals instead of what your parents wanted for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the turning point was when I was at my new college. I went to Furman University in South Carolina for one semester, and that wasn't too far from home in Atlanta. So it was about a couple hours, but it was driving distance. But I think it hit my parents really hard. And I think it hit me hard too in the realization that, oh my gosh, as a first generation college student, this is real. Like this is happening. And what we imagined our future to be collectively, like for me and my parents, as a family unit, in reality was different. I think in a perfect world, you imagine, okay, you're going to go to college, everything's going to be fine. You're going to go pre-med and become a doctor, and it'll be easy peasy. But I think the reality of me being away from home and me actually going through the courses and realizing the reality of the future being so far away and so real and so tangible was scary for a lot of us, and us as a family unit. So when we talk about college and going through the movement of passing the classes and checking off the boxes, applying to med school, preparing for that, both like mentally, emotionally, and financially, I think the realization came up that, okay, maybe med school isn't one, what I want to do because I'm the one going through the classes and the motions. And also too financially, right? If I'm the one who's applying for scholarships or my parents are helping me financially, maybe in reality, this is a much bigger thing than we first hoped it would be. So I think my first semester in college was truly the turning point of, okay, is this actually going to be my path, or is this something that we've dreamed up and it's not really feasible for us as a family?
I know you moved here from South Korea when you were younger, and as a daughter of immigrants myself, I definitely felt a lot of pressure to perform and achieve because my parents had sacrificed so much. Did you feel that similarly, or what do you remember about growing up in an immigrant household and what your educational or career goals were versus that?
Yeah. Yeah, I moved from South Korea to Atlanta when I was 7. And so I would say, most of my formative years were here. However, I do remember how strange everything felt when I moved here and how different I felt and seemed from my classmates. Even at a younger age, that's something you notice, especially, of course, with the language barrier. I took some English courses when I was in Korea. That's kind of the norm, and I think like that's becoming the norm in a lot of other countries. But when I moved here, obviously I was in ESL classes, so learning English as a second language, and that was difficult. Making friends was difficult. But thankfully, when we had moved, my parents had somehow found a community where there were other Korean individuals. And so that kind of softened the growing pains and the curve just a little bit. But it definitely was difficult trying to assimilate. And as a younger child, you don't think of your identity, right? Like, am I Korean still? Am I American now? Like, I don't really know what that means. And of course, too, there's an added complexity of immigration. And so, legally, can I call myself a Korean American, or am I still just a Korean, or what does that look like? And just growing up and trying to figure that out and add to my vocabulary in such a complex way was definitely difficult.
And what was high school like for you, or do you remember anything from that period? Like, what did you love about it, or what did you
Yeah.
hate about high school?
I really enjoyed high school. I do feel as if that is when I experienced a lot of like growth and the initial creation of my identity as a Korean American and what it means to be Korean in the US. I, pride myself in having a diverse group of friends, and I think the sense of community really was fostered when I was in high school, meaning I had a lot of Korean American friends, but I also was um, a manager of a wrestling team, and I also was a cheerleader. And so I found myself in these little different pockets of the high school community where I felt like I kind of taught myself how to belong in different groups. And I think that's a strength that I carry with me even to this day, where I really had to push myself to be proactive, to be a part of everything.
And what inspired you to go into nursing?
So there aren't many healthcare professionals in my family. My parents were always trade workers. My mom was a nanny and she cleaned. And my dad tried business and, immigrant life. They tried a little bit of everything, but they did not have any healthcare skills. I have one family member who is an operating room nurse in Korea, and she has been for many, many years. But I knew always in the back of the mind, oh, I know my aunt is an operating room nurse. Maybe that means that I have something in me that means that I could be in healthcare. I really thought I was wanting to be a physician or a doctor, but it didn't seem tangible to me. And so my friend said, my aunt is a nurse practitioner. Do you want to have a conversation with her? And I think in that moment, I was so like moldable and so young and so eager. I was like, yes, absolutely. I'll take the conversation. Like, let me talk to her. She was an emergency room nurse practitioner, and she kind of talked to me through what she did. She worked as a nurse first, and then she pursued her master's and became a nurse practitioner. And at that time in the hospital, she was working a flexible schedule. She was still doing things with her family on her days off. So that timeline also made much sense to me at the time. Also, the training of becoming a nurse practitioner was very intriguing to me because you work as a nurse first, and then while you're working as a nurse, then you become a nurse practitioner. And so just the thought of being able to work and give back to my community while I was pursuing an advanced degree was very like attractive to me.
Right, that makes sense. So it's not a trade-off between education and work,
Right.
and you're progressing in
Exactly.
your career path. That actually makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Tell me about your first job in nursing and what your day-to-day was like, what you were doing, and what specialty you were in, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love thinking back on this because I realize as the years go on how much I learned from that first job. So, my first job in the nursing world or in healthcare in general was when I was a patient care technician or a PCT or a tech or an extern. There are so many different ways to describe that role on a postpartum care unit. So, after a patient has their baby or goes through labor and delivery, then oftentimes hospitals have a different unit where you go afterward called postpartum care or family centered care. And that's where they spend a couple of days before going home. Because after you have a baby and go through delivery, you're still sensitive, you're still losing some blood, and the baby needs to be taken care of and have a couple assessments and medications and such. And so I was the patient care tech unit on a postpartum floor. So what a shift looked like was I worked 12-hour shifts. And so I would be in charge of a section of rooms of patients. And so that was anywhere from four patients to about 12. And so around the clock, every hour or every 4 hours or every 8 hours, there were certain things that we needed to do, such as take vital signs, so blood pressure, temperature, things like that. Certain wound dressing changes. So for patients who had had C-sections, I would change the dressing of that. I would basically also assist the nurse in anything that they needed help doing. So, changing the linens on the bed or changing the baby. One of my favorite parts actually was giving the baby their first bath in the hospital. It is actually so much harder than you would think holding a baby with one hand while washing it and making sure it doesn't get too cold, and also the baby's crying. It was a lot of hard work for me. And at the time, I was, gosh, how old was I? I think I was probably 20 years old or 21. So it was also new to me. Obviously, I didn't have any children and I still don't now, but I learned so much in that role that I take with me as a nurse, but also as an individual.
Wow. You know, nurses are so amazing. And I have to say, like, whether you're in the hospital for an emergency, surgery, giving birth, like you're talking about, I still remember my night nurse when I had my first child, and she was
Mhm.
amazing. Like, for all the reasons you're saying, the balance of all these tasks and taking care of the baby and the mom, it's just incredible to hear about. And are you still in postpartum care, or what kind of nurse are you now?
So after postpartum care, I realized that I like the adrenaline, I like the fun, I like the fast pace. So then I went on to become a labor and delivery nurse for about 3 to 4 years. And while I was working nights as a labor and delivery nurse, I was obtaining my master's. And so now I'm a gynecology nurse practitioner. So when people go for their pap smears or their annual visits, that's the kind of provider that I am. So, a lot of family planning, meaning talking about birth control and safe sex and STD prevention and treatment and things like that. That's what I'm doing now.
Hi, this is Ellie Lou from Los Angeles, California. I was wondering, what are the different kinds of nurses and what are the different specialties?
So, the beauty of nursing is that you can really do anything with your degree. There are so many different specialties and environments that you can work in as a registered nurse. And if you feel like you are detail oriented and you like things in order and you like to do things every hour or every 15 minutes or every 4 hours, then something like the intensive care unit or ICU would be wonderful for you because you need to be very detail oriented because you're taking care of a lot of very sick patients. Now, if you also like routine, but you don't necessarily like high stress or um, things to be too detail oriented, then something like the operating room could be great because you're exposed to a lot of surgery cases, but a variety of them, and every case can be a little different. For example, a C-section surgery will be totally different than like a knee replacement surgery. If you find that you are more of like a nurturing person or you like the kind of like the miracles of life and you want to be kind of in a whole different world of medicine and in nursing, I think something like labor and delivery or the neonatal intensive care unit or the NICU or postpartum will be good for you because you see the miracle of childbirth and labor and the immediate postpartum care afterward. So that's just kind of a glimpse into what you can pursue as a registered nurse. There's so many different opportunities, and also too, you don't just have to be in the hospital. You can be outside in a clinic as well.
Is there a personality type or something that would not be well suited for nursing? Because it's just as important to know what you're not good at or what you shouldn't pursue as it is to know what you want to pursue. So what would you say to that?
Totally. I would say nursing or healthcare in general is better suited for individuals who identify more as type A. So someone who likes to follow the rules, they like to know the why, they like to know that there is a protocol or like a timeline. You have A, then you have B, then C and D. If you're the type of person who thinks, okay, I'm presented with a problem, I don't really care for what causes this, I just want to figure it out, then medicine or healthcare might not be for you. But if you are interested in why things happen and you want to fix things, then healthcare might be a good fit for you.
Awesome. Switching gears, you were one of the first healthcare professionals, I believe, that were an Instagram creator. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into becoming a creator in social media?
Absolutely. I really do think it's a path that kind of I fell into. I don't think I went into sharing my life and my experience on social media thinking, okay, I want to be a creator. I think it's different now. I think now you have to be very proactive and intentional in deciding, okay, I do want to create digital content like photos and video, and I want to share that part of myself on the internet compared to previously when this industry was first starting. It was kind of something that happened naturally and accidentally almost. So actually, I started sharing parts of my life and my thought process as a high school student on Instagram and on Tumblr, actually. Some people listening to this might not know what Tumblr is, but it was like the original like blogging platform, similar to MySpace, but like
Mm-hmm.
pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, pre-TikTok. And I really was sharing my experience of being a high schooler, how I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I thought I was interested in health and fitness, but throughout figuring out my career path and what I wanted to do and who I was, I started to attract people who were going through a similar journey. So people my age or people who were in their second career trying to figure things out. And that's how my platform grew to what it is now, because ultimately once you share like parts of yourself and parts of your story, then it's just natural that people kind of relate to you because people see themselves in your story.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to shift to just advice to our community. So, both in terms of being a nurse and in terms of being a creator. If you were just starting out in nursing, what are one or two simple things that you would do during your school years in order to prepare for a job in nursing?
I say this a lot and I will always preach this. The most important thing to do in your school years in preparing for applying to a nursing program or going to college is to make sure that you have great connections and have professors or administrators or teachers who will vouch for you and will write you references or recommendation letters. Now, I'm not saying create a fake relationship with the teacher just so you can get a letter. But really, when you're in a classroom, no one knows you like the teacher does, and they can see your growth as a student, they learn who you are as an individual, and knowing that these teachers can vouch for you and really tell the story of who you are, aside from how you tell the story of who you are, is really important. Especially as you are in the workforce, there's really nothing like having someone else being able to tell your story for you, because that's really powerful. And you never know who the people you know.
That's so true. If you're a student, what are some like real tactical ways to develop that relationship with your teacher?
I would say a tactical way to actually create a relationship with your teacher is to seek advice from them, have regular conversations with them, aside from just going to class and leaving and you get a grade and that's it. Go to class. If you don't do well on an exam, go after class or after school or before class and ask, how can I do better? Can you like talk me through why I didn't get question two correct? And do you think there are better ways that I can prepare for my next test?
Have you ever faced any either direct or indirect obstacles in your career because of your identity as a Korean American woman? Or maybe opportunities. They don't have to be struggles, but I'm curious how your identity has made an impact in your career, either as a nurse or a creator.
Yeah, like I had shared before, I think in the nursing world and in healthcare, I'm very grateful that it is a world that is quite diverse. So there are a lot of nurses who are female, and that's just the reality of, I think, the nursing workforce. I think a lot of women are either encouraged to go into nursing, or I'm not sure. Maybe that's a different conversation, I think. However, I think being a Korean American in the South is a different challenge that some students may relate to. I think, yes, while healthcare and nursing is diverse and there are a lot of female representation, being someone who didn't look like or wasn't identifying as a white individual in a Southern hospital was difficult for me. Sometimes there would be patients who would not be as accepting of a nurse who didn't look like them, or would flat out say, I do not want a non white nurse. And that's, of course, very hurtful because I know what I'm good at. I'm here to help you. However, you are denying my care and my help
Your
because of my
expertise.
race.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Now, I'm very grateful in that that's not a regular occurrence, but I do think that in some parts of the world, it can be. It's definitely higher in certain parts of the nation versus others. However, I do think that if you know yourself and you know your ability and your expertise, like you said, and who you are as an individual, that's not something that will necessarily hold you back professionally.
If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self and give her a little career advice, what would you say to young Clara?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I would tell young Clara that there's no rush. I think a lot of us, when we are in high school and then we are thinking about college and then we enter college and then we enter the workforce, we feel like we have to have it all figured out immediately. I think having a plan is wonderful, and I think that's the way that we can set goals and take actionable steps to becoming the person we want to be. However, I think a lot of us feel really stressed out that we have to go to high school, go to college, be a doctor, do all these things in record time. And then we forget about having hobbies or doing things that make us happy or pursuing like a sport or making friends. And ultimately, I really want to stress to the audience, but also to younger Clara, if she was listening, that your first job is not your forever job. You're not stuck there forever. So it's okay if the first job you take out of college isn't the job you're going to be at forever. and that you don't have to have it all figured out immediately. It comes in time.
Amazing. Clara, where can folks find you on social media?
They can find me on Instagram at It's Clara Jones and also on TikTok at The Clara Jones and on my website at itsclarajones.com.
Amazing. Well, huge thank you for coming on our show and for sharing your story and just for being who you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time.
If you liked today's show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to rate and review us. We are at Most Likely To Show on YouTube and at Most Likely To.show on Instagram and TikTok. Tag us in your posts about the show. We always want to know who you're interested in hearing from, so email us your requests for podcast guests at podcast@donorschoose.org or DM us on Instagram.